hasn't Kim Jong-un responded to your request to have a conversation?
How do you know he hasn't responded?
Has he?
Yeah, he has.
Did you speak to
Where
him?
are you in conversation?
And very positive. Well, just so you understand with South Korea, look, South Korea has been protected by us for many, many years. And during my first term, they agreed to pay close to $3 billion a year for protection because they essentially weren't paying. And I asked them to do that at my request. I said, not right. They weren't happy about it, but they agreed. I asked for $10 billion, and they were very unhappy. But we agreed for a short term that it would be $3 billion, and next year it would go up, and the next year it would go up, so they start paying for their protection. When the election was rigged and I ended up watching for 4 years and then coming back, I watched Biden rescind that $3 billion a year for whatever reason. When I called recently the president of South Korea, who I like, I think he's very nice, actually.
All right, folks, Dr. John podcast is officially on. In the Oval Office, Trump exploded when CNN's Kristen Holmes asked a routine foreign policy question whether Kim Jong-un had requested scaled-back military exercises. The exchange captured Trump's combative relationship with the media in a single raw moment. The response was immediate and volcanic. Trump didn't answer the question. He didn't clarify his policy. He didn't explain his reasoning. Instead, he turned on the reporter with barely contained fury. "Be quiet," he said. "Be quiet, be quiet." 3 times in a row, he told her to be quiet. Then he asked where she worked, setting up the pivot that everyone in the room knew was coming. When she said CNN, Trump unleashed the predictable attack.
But I called him. I said, would you like to give us a little hand? We don't need help with Iran, but if you'd like, give us a hand with Iran. He said, no, thanks. And I said, wait a minute, we have 39,000 soldiers over there guarding you from Kim Jong-un, your next door neighbor, and you're not going to help us on a very easy military operation in Iran? That's strange. No, we'd rather not get involved. I say, well, why are we involved in helping you? And I want to help them, but, when you ask somebody, would you like to give us a hand, and they say, no, thanks, and then we're guarding them from a country and paying ourselves billions of dollars. It's costing us billions and billions of dollars to protect not only them, but other countries. Look at NATO. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars protecting Europe from Russia. Hundreds of billions, mostly from Russia, but from other things too. And then they say, well, they don't want to get involved with
calling the entire network fake news and dismissing her as a fake reporter. This wasn't a press conference. It was a shutdown, a deliberate effort to make an uncomfortable question disappear rather than engage with it honestly. And the effect was exactly what Trump likely intended. The question about Kim Jong-un and South Korea, the policy substance that actually mattered, got completely buried under the weight of Trump's outburst. The confrontation became the story, not the policy question that provoked it. Think about what Holmes actually asked. She didn't claim Kim had ordered anything. She didn't state it as established fact.
Guarding the strait where they get most of their oil, they get 50% of their oil, and they don't want to get involved. Why are we doing it? So all I want is fairness. And South Korea, I get along with them very well, but they were paying $3 billion a year, and then they convinced Biden that I was probably a bad person and they shouldn't, and he immediately rescinded that order. So we were getting paid. We would have been getting paid a lot more, but we can't go around and protect all of these countries, especially when they're not there to help us.
On the expiration of the Memorandum of Understanding, are you any closer today to reaching a final deal to end Iran's nuclear program?
Well, they want to make a deal, but they're not going to make the kind of a deal that I feel is necessary. Look, we're in there for one reason. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. You understand that? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon. And right now, them building one after what we did previously with the B-2 bombers, going to be a long time behalf. But Iran cannot have. It's very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
How do you respond to those folks who say that
She asked a direct, reasonable question about a real decision Trump had already made. Trump had been defending his decision to scale back joint military exercises between the United States and South Korea, a decision with serious implications for one of America's most important treaty alliances. And as part of that defense, he kept pointing to his personal relationship with Kim Jong-un, framing it as positive and productive. Holmes's question was directly on point. If a foreign adversary's leader is effectively shaping changes to how America conducts military exercises with its own treaty ally, that's a genuinely serious national security question that deserves a real answer. Instead of getting one, she got a wall of personal attacks and network dismissals that engaged with nothing she had asked.
You are prioritizing the interests of adversaries in North Korea over our longtime partners by scaling back these military exercises.
No, I'm making it much safer. You see, I'm actually making it much safer. Kim Jong-un has always treated me with great respect. And we met on numerous occasions, actually, 2 primary occasions, spoken and spent time. I understand him. He understands me. You're doing war games. I get along with him. You know, he didn't like Biden. He didn't like Obama. He didn't like anybody. But I get along with him very well. No, what I'm doing is making things safer. Just the opposite. Quiet. You're very disrespectful in front of this young man. Okay? Don't you find her disrespectful? He understands. Quiet. Who are you with?
I'm with CNN.
Fake news. You're fake news. You're a loud, boisterous person. You're fake news. Be quiet. Be quiet. Be quiet.
This is the pattern that has defined Trump's relationship with the press throughout his political career. Any question that makes him uncomfortable, any inquiry that probes beneath the surface of his claims, any request for clarification that he doesn't want to provide, all of it gets met with the same response. Attack the messenger, dismiss the network, label it all fake news. Never actually answer the question. What's particularly striking about this incident is how unnecessary the confrontation was. If the honest answer to Holmes's question was, no, Kim never asked for anything, that's the easiest response in the world. A simple, direct denial would have ended the whole exchange in seconds and left Trump looking confident and in control. Instead, the reaction suggested something else entirely.
You're a fake reporter, and you report fake news. Go ahead.
Mr. President, is there enough food on the USS Lincoln?
Yeah, it is. That was a CNN fake report. The Lincoln has been out there for a period of time, good period of time. But over the years, we've had them out there much longer. I was at a group meeting, and an admiral came up to see me over the weekend. And it was at a big group, and he happened to be an admiral retired. He said, I've been on ships that are out there much longer than that, sir. And I know people on the Lincoln, they say it's beautifully maintained and beautifully taken care of. And other people went out and they found out to be true. It was fake news reporting from CNN.
Mr. President, there was a report that a senior intelligence official with the CCP just bought a historical building overlooking the White House. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't heard this.
Mr. President.
Perhaps genuine irritation at having his relationship with Kim scrutinized, perhaps discomfort with the actual reasoning behind the drill reduction, perhaps just a reflexive hostility to any question that didn't flatter him. Whatever the underlying reason, the effect was the same. The question went unanswered. The policy substance got buried, and the exchange itself became the story. Exactly the outcome that tends to happen when a pointed question gets met with confrontation rather than a direct response. It's worth noting that this wasn't even the only heated moment from that same Oval Office session. Earlier, Holmes had asked Trump to respond to comments from Senator Jon Ossoff about Executive Assistant Natalie Hart. Trump's response was to dismiss Ossoff as a Pee Wee Herman lookalike, not a rebuttal of whatever Ossoff said. Not an explanation of Hart's role, just a personal jab at the senator's appearance. So within a single press event, you've got 2 separate legitimate questions. One about a sitting senator's comments and one about a major foreign policy decision. both met with deflection and personal attacks instead of substantive answers. The pattern is unmistakable. If you ask Trump something he doesn't want to answer, he won't engage with the substance. He'll attack you, attack your network, attack anyone associated with the question, and hope that the confrontation will distract from the original inquiry. It's a strategy that has worked for Trump for years. The media covers the confrontation, replays the clips, analyzes the outrage, and the original question gets lost in the shuffle. Meanwhile, the public never gets the answer they deserve, and the policy substance remains shrouded in the same ambiguity that Trump prefers. But this time, the escalation went even further. After the event wrapped, the White House's official rapid response account posted a personal attack directed at Holmes. The post read, "Someday your children will come across your disgusting and inhumane question." Think about that for a second. This isn't a press secretary pushing back on a story. This isn't even Trump himself firing off a frustrated tweet. This is an official White House communications account specifically targeting an individual reporter in language that invokes her own children reading it someday. CNN's response was blunt. They called the post beneath the office. And it's hard to argue with that characterization. An official government account making that kind of personal, emotionally loaded attack on a journalist doing her job is a genuinely different category of response than Trump's own in-the-moment outburst. One is a president losing his patience in real time. The other is a deliberate, considered decision by White House staff to escalate a personal attack on an official government platform hours after the actual event, with time to think it over before hitting publish. The specific wording of the post deserves closer attention. Criticizing a journalist's reporting even harshly is one thing. Framing a professional question as something so shameful that a reporter's own kids would someday be embarrassed by it is a different kind of attack entirely. It's designed to land on a personal, emotional level rather than engaging with anything substantive about the question itself. And when that kind of language comes from an official government communications account, it carries a weight that anonymous social media posts don't have. It represents the institutional voice of the White House choosing to frame a legitimate journalistic question as disgusting and inhumane. Let's also talk about what happened when a different reporter asked Trump about reported conditions on the USS Abraham Lincoln. The aircraft carrier that has been the subject of serious concern from military families, lawmakers, and outlets like Military Times and Stars and Stripes over its extended 9-month Iran-related deployment. Trump's response was to dismiss those accounts entirely as CNN fake reporting. Now, here's the thing worth understanding. The USS Lincoln concerns didn't originate solely from CNN. Senator Richard Blumenthal raised those concerns directly. Military-focused outlets that specifically cover service member welfare reported on them independently. So labeling the entire controversy as one network's fake reporting isn't just dismissive towards CNN specifically. It actually mischaracterizes who's been asking these questions in the first place. And when you connect that dismissal to the earlier Kim Jong-un confrontation and the personal attack on Holmes, you start to see a broader pattern playing out across this single news cycle. One where CNN specifically and reporters asking uncomfortable questions generally are being met with blanket dismissal rather than direct engagement with the substance of what they're actually asking. It's worth stepping back and thinking about how consistently this pattern shows up across completely different topics. A foreign policy question about South Korea and North Korea gets the same fake news label as a domestic military welfare story about conditions on a carrier. A senator's comments about a White House aide get dismissed with a personal insult rather than substantive engagement. 3 genuinely different subjects, 3 genuinely different reporters and lawmakers involved. And yet the response pattern looks remarkably similar each time. That consistency is honestly one of the more telling parts of this entire event, because it suggests this isn't just one reporter having a uniquely bad day with one uniquely sensitive question. It looks more like a broader, repeatable approach to handling any question that doesn't have an easy, flattering answer readily available. The mechanics of how Trump handled the CNN identification moment are particularly revealing. Asking a reporter where they work before responding to their question isn't a neutral informational request. It's a setup. Once Holmes said CNN, the entire direction of Trump's response shifted immediately toward attacking the network's credibility rather than engaging with anything she'd actually asked. That sequence, question, network identification, immediate pivot to network criticism suggests the reporter's outlet mattered more to how Trump responded than the actual content of what she was asking, which again circles back to the core problem here. The question about Kim Jong-un and the South Korea drills was a policy question that deserved a policy answer regardless of which network happened to be asking it. When you step back and look at the full picture, what you're really looking at is a single Oval Office event that produced 3 separate flashpoints. A dismissive jab at a sitting senator over comments about a White House aide. An explosive repeated shutdown of a reporter asking a legitimate national security question. And a follow-up dismissal of a completely separate military welfare story. All lumped together under the same fake news label. Individually, each of these moments might read as just another heated exchange in a long pattern of Trump versus media conflict. But together, especially with the White House's own social media account escalating things even further after the fact, they start to paint a picture of a press strategy built around deflection and personal attack, rather than direct answers to direct questions. The most consequential thing that happened during that entire Oval Office event was arguably the least discussed afterward. Whether Kim Jong-un actually influenced a real American military decision involving a treaty ally is a genuinely important national security question. Instead, what dominated the coverage afterward was Trump's outburst, the Pee Wee Herman comment, and the White House's social media attack on Holmes. That's not an accident of how news cycles work. When a president responds to a hard question with an explosive personal confrontation, that reaction almost always generates more attention than the original question itself. So, in a strange way, Trump's response ended up drawing far more focus to the underlying South Korea question than a calm, direct answer ever would have. A straightforward denial would have been one sentence, and then the story moves on. Instead, the confrontation created a story that dominated coverage for days. There's also something worth considering regarding what this pattern signals to other reporters covering this White House. When a journalist asks a legitimate, well-sourced question and gets met with public humiliation in the Oval Office, followed by an official government account escalating things further on social media, that sends a message well beyond just Holmes and CNN. It's the kind of response that can make other reporters think twice before asking similarly uncomfortable questions, regardless of how legitimate those questions might be. Whether that's the intended effect or simply a byproduct of how Trump handles pointed questions, the practical impact on press dynamics going forward is worth watching closely. There's a broader historical pattern worth noting here too, one that extends beyond just this single administration. Tense exchanges between presidents and reporters are nothing new in American politics. Pointed, uncomfortable questions have always been part of what press briefings and Oval Office events are supposed to allow for. What makes this particular pattern stand out is less the existence of tension itself and more the specific combination of elements involved. A direct policy question met with total deflection. A separate question about a senator's comments met with a personal insult about that senator's appearance rather than engagement with substance. And then an official government account escalating things even further after the fact with language deliberately designed to land on a personal emotional level. Individually, tense press moments happen under every administration. This particular combination, though, especially the institutional social media escalation piece, represents a genuinely notable shift in how directly a White House is willing to personally target an individual reporter using its own official platforms. The line between criticizing reporting and attacking the reporter is a meaningful one, and the White House crossed it decisively with that post about Holmes's children. Section 3. Let's break this down into the pieces that actually matter, because there's a lot happening here and it's worth separating out clearly. First and foremost, the actual question Holmes asked was legitimate, specific, and directly tied to a real policy decision Trump had already defended publicly. She asked whether Kim Jong-un had requested the reduction in joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises. That's it. Not whether Kim ordered it, not stating it as established fact, just asking directly. If a foreign leader's personal relationship with a U.S. president is genuinely shaping decisions about American military posture with a treaty ally, the American public deserves a straight answer about that. Regardless of how uncomfortable the question might be to answer, this kind of question sits at the very center of what a free press is actually supposed to do, testing whether a stated policy rationale holds up under direct scrutiny rather than simply repeating whatever framing officials offer. Trump's response was a complete non-answer repeated 3 times over. Telling a reporter to be quiet 3 times in a row, followed by fake reporter and fake news, does not address whether Kim requested anything. It shifts the entire conversation away from the substance of the policy and onto the reporter herself. If the honest answer was simply no, Kim didn't ask for this, that's a 5-second response that actually resolves the question. Instead, what the public got was an extended shutdown that left the actual policy question completely unanswered. This wasn't an isolated incident within that event. Earlier in the same Oval Office session, Trump dismissed a legitimate question about Senator Ossoff's comments on Natalie Hart by calling Ossoff a Pee Wee Herman lookalike rather than engaging with whatever substance Ossoff had actually raised. That establishes a pattern within a single event, not just a one-off loss of temper over one specific question. And it's worth remembering that this jab came before the Kim Jong-un confrontation, meaning the sharper reaction to Holmes wasn't a first isolated flare-up, but rather the second instance of deflection within that same short window. This is honestly the part that deserves the most scrutiny. The White House's rapid response account posted a direct personal attack on Holmes after the event, invoking her own children reading the post someday. That's not spontaneous frustration. That's a considered deliberate escalation from an official government communications account targeting a specific journalist by name well after the actual confrontation had already happened. CNN calling that post beneath the office is honestly a pretty restrained response to what amounts to an official government account making an emotionally charged personal attack on a reporter for doing her job. There's also a meaningful distinction worth drawing between how Trump personally responded and how the official account responded afterward. Trump's outburst, however sharp, happened live, unscripted, in the heat of an actual press interaction. The rapid response post came later from an institutional account with time to consider its wording, which arguably makes the personal, emotionally targeted framing even harder to explain away as simple frustration. Trump's dismissal of the USS Lincoln reporting as CNN fake reporting later in that same broader news cycle mischaracterizes where those concerns actually originated. Senator Blumenthal, along with military-focused outlets like Military Times and Stars and Stripes, raised those concerns independently of CNN. Reducing the entire controversy down to one network's supposed bias skips over the broader multi-source reporting behind that story. And it fits into the same pattern of blanket dismissal we saw with the Kim Jong-un question and the Ossoff comment. That repetition across 3 separate topics in a single event is what elevates this beyond a single bad moment and into something closer to a consistent communication strategy. The real unanswered question at the center of all this, whether Kim Jong-un actually shaped a major American military decision, still doesn't have a clear answer. And that honestly might be exactly the outcome this kind of response is designed to produce. It's also worth remembering that the underlying South Korea policy itself remains a live ongoing issue independent of how this particular press exchange played out. Reducing joint military exercises with a treaty ally carries real consequences for regional deterrence and alliance trust, regardless of whether Kim Jong-un ever actually requested it. So even setting aside everything that happened with Holmes, the White House owes the public, and honestly owes South Korea as an ally, a much clearer explanation of the actual reasoning behind that decision than what's been offered so far. That's exactly why this story deserves more attention than just a viral clip of Trump telling a reporter to be quiet 3 times in a row. The clip is memorable, and honestly, it's a genuinely striking moment on its own. But the policy question underneath it, whether America's relationship with a treaty ally is being shaped by a foreign adversary's leader, is the part that actually affects people well beyond this one news cycle. Losing sight of that in favor of just replaying the confrontation itself would mean missing the whole point of why Holmes asked the question in the first place. The exchange in the Oval Office tells us something important about how this administration handles scrutiny. A legitimate question about a consequential foreign policy decision was met not with an answer, but with a shutdown. The question disappeared, the reporter was attacked, the network was dismissed, and the policy substance never got addressed. That's a pattern that has repeated itself countless times across countless issues. And it's a pattern that ultimately leaves the American public less informed about decisions that affect their security and their interests. The press has a constitutional role in holding power accountable. That role only works if reporters can ask questions without fear of personal attacks from the government they're covering. When a White House uses its official communications platforms to target individual journalists with emotionally loaded language about their families, it crosses a line that undermines the very foundation of a free press. The question Holmes asked deserved an answer, not an attack. The public deserved clarity about a significant policy shift, not a confrontation designed to bury the issue. We'll be watching closely for whether Trump or the White House ever actually addresses that original question directly. Because right now, all we've got is the outburst, not the answer. The policy substance remains shrouded in the same ambiguity that Trump prefers, and the American people are left wondering whether a foreign adversary's leader shaped a major American military decision. That's not how democracy is supposed to work, and it's not how the relationship between the press and the presidency is supposed to function. The moment in the Oval Office will be remembered as a flashpoint in Trump's ongoing war with the media. But what should be remembered even more is the question that never got answered. Whether Kim Jong-un asked for the drill reduction is a legitimate national security question that affects millions of people. It deserves a straight answer. And until we get one, the most important part of this story remains unresolved.